On this podcast, we explore the many dimensions of spirituality and how they intersect with everyday life. Join us as we dive deep into conversations about how people are serving humanity, embodying spiritual wisdom, and creating positive change in the world. From ancient traditions to modern practices, the Spirituality Now podcast is your space to discover, learn, and be inspired. Welcome to the Spirituality Now podcast. I am your host. And for some reason, I'm called to say to you that besides listening to the podcast and subscribing and all of that, don't take life so serious. This is what is coming to me right now. I'm like in the moment kind of gal, and don't take life so seriously. Don't take like your resources, your teachings, your knowledge so serious that it becomes so strict that you are entrapped by it. This is fresh from the ethers of my mind. And with that, I welcome you again to the Spirituality Now podcast. Today, I have a guest that I've been literally, after his content and reading about him and his sharings and sharing what he shares here and then, I met him through a mutual friend that was in the podcast. I want to pay tribute where tribute is due. I believe in that. And his name is Satyan Raya. And you can watch, listen. I think you only listen because we didn't have YouTube back in the days. But you can listen to his podcast. He's a phenomenal leader, very spiritually grounded leadership of sorts, and a really fun friend also. And thanks to him, I met our guest today. And I want to introduce him to you. And probably you know the bios, they don't make justice to our guests. And our guests tend to be pretty humble. No matter the length of their bios, they tend to be pretty humble. And what you discover about them is more in our conversation than in any bio that we can share with you. So let me introduce you to my guest today. My guest today is Mr. Sam Morris. He is a multifaceted leader, speaker, coach, mentor, author, musician. I want to talk to him about that. And philosopher, driven by a singular purpose, empowering others. For over 3 decades, Mr. Sam has helped individuals achieve profound transformation in financial, physical, and spiritual wellness. Clients come to Sam when they are ready to accelerate their personal evolution, seeking to improve leadership, relationships, and overall well-being. Under the ethos of less is more, I particularly love this, especially being like Mexican, that we tend to accumulate more, to go to less. Sam fosters a secure, empathetic environment where growth is cultivated through compassion, insight, and wisdom. And for those of you who have studied these aspects of compassion and wisdom, whether in Buddhism or not, I believe that compassion and wisdom is what makes really intelligent humans when they are used together. Anyways, clients consistently describe working with Sam as the most rewarding investment they've made in themselves. Sam's approach is unique, distinguished by a lifelong journey of facilitating psycho-spiritual breakthroughs. That sounds just right there. We can talk about this all the podcast through. Unlike others who rush into business after certification, Sam has honed the ability to help individuals turn adversity into opportunities for growth. Sam's work is centered on advancing careers, nurturing relationships, and celebrating their lives enriched through meaningful, lasting change, and so much more. And there's so much Zen vibe here. But I'm going to let my guest share that with you. Welcome, Sam, to the show.
Thank you, Ivonne. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Wow. Sam, I hear we were talking behind the scenes a little bit, and your voice is in an instant calm. I'm so excited. I come on like excited. You're like so grounded. The voice is already transmitting the scent, is already transmitting the calmness, the nervous system, the center nervous system. So that's where we're going to start. And I'll keep the excitement that I have to have you here in the show going. But that's where we're going to start. So,
Oh, I love
first
that.
of all,
I've never started
dear
there.
Sam, you're really calm. You're really centered. I can feel the groundedness of your nervous system, and that is usually something that is learned and trained over years. I mean, I don't know a lot of people that were born and like my nervous system is centered and calm. The people that I have met, very few people, like I can count them with my hand, like you, that are really centered, kind of heart center, mind center, nervous system center. In my experience, they have gone through a lot or a very deep journey that brought them here. So let's start by you sharing a little bit of your journey that led you to this right now, which is hard to say, but what is your journey? Tell us a little bit about your background, your childhood, those kind of juicy things.
Well, first of all, thank you. I will take that as a compliment that my nervous system feels calm and grounded. And I really appreciate you saying that. And I've never started here, and I don't think I've ever even approached the subject of the resonance of voice and so forth. So that's definitely something that we can explore. Um, I grew up in an environment where, fortunately, my nervous system was able to be very grounded from childhood in many respects, growing up on a blueberry farm in Maine. And not, the benefit, I suppose, of that was that culture to me was something that came through magazines and from the occasional opportunity to watch a little bit of TV on whatever TV was available in the early or the mid 70s and 80s when I was growing up. But didn't, I wasn't inside of the culture. Culture was something that came from the outside that I would be somewhat interested in, but it wasn't something that I was immersed in. And what I was immersed in was nature. I was immersed in my explorations in the forest and my camping out at night and looking up at the stars and seeing the beautiful starry sky and being full of wonder at the galaxy and feeling this beautiful mystery and connecting that way and being really very much grounded in my relationship with nature from very early on. So, of course, I eventually, like all of us, began to experience culture as it came in through school and through trends and that sort of thing, and started to identify with my social group and the skateboarders and the alternative music fans and all of those types of things, all of those layers of identity that we all eventually during that sort of young to adolescent period begin to stack on to the pure experience of consciousness that we're born with. Um, but fortunately, I was also simultaneously rooted in nature. And I think that part of what really expanded me from a space of an appreciation of nature alone, the way that, say, someone who is a farmer or recreational nature lover has to a more, say, spiritual journey into the mystery of consciousness itself, was my exploration of psychedelics when I was in my mid-teens, which really opened me up in a way that I had no way to possibly imagine that it would. And recognizing that we human beings are living this strange, illusory existence through the lens of the ego, and that there is so much more to the infinite nature of consciousness that we have the capacity to tap into. So that really, in many respects, shaped the trajectory of my life. And then when I was in college, I began to study Buddhism, and I recognized the profound nature of the teachings of Buddhism with respect to how suffering was created by attachment to impermanent things and impermanent ideas, etc. And then this was in the mid to late 90s that I was in college. And then in 1999, I had just finished leading a cycling trek across the United States for a group of teenagers. And shortly after finishing that journey, I was riding in the backseat of a car driven by a driver who had been drinking, and we went off the road and hit a tree, and I broke my back and became paraplegic. And I never anticipated that I would have to work with applying the principles of non-attachment to a whole half of my body. So I lost the ability to feel and move my body from my waist down at that time. So it gave me moment by moment by moment by moment practice of releasing attachment to my physical form in the way that I thought that I would just always have my physical form until I was old and decrepit. And so releasing that attachment and being forced to at such an early stage of life made me curious about other attachments and how the things that we believe will last forever won't create that sense of suffering inside of ourselves. So I would say all of those things in concert have contributed to my mindset and grounded energy and what you're reflecting.
Wow. Sam, I can relate to so many things. And first of all, the connection to nature. What a grounding space for healing and for exploration and for deepening into consciousness. I haven't found something so clear as a mirror as nature is for whatever and I say I because he's so fleeting. I don't have an eye. I believe I have an eye. And I think you understand it. But I have not found such a clear mirror as nature, like to reflect to me that impermanence, that emptiness that I am, how fleeting I am already, how I'm already gone, right? And how everything in its natural cycle will just continue or not, or not. But I love that connection that you have with nature. I can feel it as you were sharing. I can see it like since you were a child. And then, how old were you when you had that? I'm not going to call it accident. I'm going to call it incident.
Yeah,
How old were you?
I had just turned 24.
Okay, you were 24 because I had a similar experience. And experience is such a limited word because it's more than experience, as you know. I had a situation and incident, not accident. At 17, I lost an arm, the legs. I have mobility by the grace of spirit, by the grace of God, and I lost an arm, they put it back. I lost a leg, they put it back. I walk funny. I always say like I walk like the penguin. Like if they needed a cast, the penguin on the Batman movie, I could go perfectly to be the female, representation of that. But I remember, when you said that you weren't, I mean, you were very young, but you had studied Buddhism, like you were kind of prepared to use the tools for that moment, that situation, right? That paralyzed your body, but didn't paralyze your soul.
Oh,
Didn't
yes.
paralyze your mind, who you are, the nature of who you are, right?
Yes.
And I love how you said that you had to apply everything and how that gave you the recognition of the impermanence, the fleetingness of existence. And I so just can relate. I wanted to add a little bit on that because it's rare to meet someone that can go through these things that we go through, right? Like not moving an arm, not moving legs, not walking, like diagnosis and everything. And taking, and I believe it was Hakuin or Torre, or I don't remember what was the name of this Zen patriarch that said that when you take your suffering as training, you're your suffering disappears, right? And you are using that for this purpose. So, Sam, we're starting the podcast already in a high consciousness note. Let's talk a little bit about that impermanence, that fleetingness. So, you are 24. You are finding yourself in a path that you require to learn to move differently, right? Through this cosmology of consciousness, which is kind of bizarre, this lila, this play of consciousness. What happens next? So you're 24, you're going through this, you're applying the tools. What happens next?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I remember, well, there's a few things worth mentioning. The first thing that was incredibly profound was when I was in the hospital shortly after the accident itself, or the incident. The doctors took me off morphine after 7 days, and I was lying in this hospital bed with my lower body paralyzed, and my upper body was in a hard shell plastic cast to keep my spine from moving. And I became lucid about what had happened for the first time since the night of the incident itself. And before that, I'd just been numb on morphine. And so I had a crisis moment where I was suddenly confronted with the sobriety and the lucidity of, holy cow, I don't know how I can possibly go on for the rest of my life. I've just turned 24. Now I'm paralyzed. And I heard in the depth of my consciousness that I should be doing yoga. And I had this brief argument with myself about how the hell can I do yoga? I'm paralyzed and I'm lying in a hospital bed. I can't even move. And I heard the message that the most important part about yoga is about the focus on the breath. And I could still breathe. And so I started taking breaths that were as deep as I possibly could, just knowing that there was no other hope. It was just breathe or just be consumed psychologically and emotionally by the trauma. And so I breathed and breathed and breathed and breathed. And the next thing I know, a sudden shift in consciousness happened. It wasn't gradual. It was totally sudden. It was like out of nowhere, I just became a pure point of conscious awareness with no identity, no relationship to the body, no relationship to time, no relationship to any narrative or any mental construct or any construct of the body or anything that was time bound. Just an empty void of pure conscious awareness. And as that happened, I also created an inverse relationship between body and breath, where previously I had perceived myself as the body breathing. But in this relationship, I became the breath breathing a body. And so I no longer felt the inhale or the exhale because I was the breath. I was in the infinite breath. And every breath that I'd taken before that felt like a incredibly minuscule experience because I was the breath. I became the breath. And for a period of time, I was in a state of pure pleroma, pure conscious awareness with zero narrative, zero context whatsoever, just breath. So that was obviously quite powerful. And then following that, as soon as I started the process of recovery, I would imagine myself while I was in rehabilitation, if I was in the hospital, say, I would put myself in a situation where I would imagine myself practicing Aikido. And I would imagine myself moving in such a way, whereas my legs were moving with the Aikido exercises. And my goal and intention was to keep the body alive, to keep the energy infusing itself through the entire body as I was doing that, thinking if there's any way that I could possibly heal from this, that the best way I could do it was start out at the level of imagination and connect in through that. And then after I went through rehabilitation, I began to study movement with Emily Conrad, who started Continuum Movement, and I became her private mentee. And so we worked together at a very subtle meditative level with gaining deeper conscious access to my lower body through breath, through sound creation, through meditation, and exploring with an open state of curiosity the movements, the subtle movements of energy that can be passing through the entire body that are independent of the central nervous system. So I was recovering my sense of wholeness through bypassing the more obvious motor function and sensory function and going into the energetic subtle bodies of energy and relationship all the way down through the soles of my feet. And so my aim at that time was to recover full function in my body and walk again. And while that didn't happen, what did happen was that I recovered my sense of wholeness at a very early period. It's not to say that the psychological trauma from the injury didn't still impact me in a lot of ways, because it did. There were periods of depression. There were periods of feeling very much like my sense of manhood had been compromised, because not only in an injury like this, in my situation, it also compromised my sexual function as well. And in our society, that's largely related to one's quote unquote sense of manhood and sort of vitality. And so, and also having a compromised relationship with my root chakra as a result left me feeling very ungrounded for long periods of time. So there was a lot of different layers that I had to work on with respect to moving through that in order to truly ground inside of myself.
Awesome. This is so deep. By the way, I was given morphine for a whole month. A whole month, Sam.
Wow.
So, because in Mexico it was like, let's just give her morphine. I was in intensive care, all of that, people thinking she's not going to keep. I kept the leg and the arm for, I believe, I want to choose to believe I had a good karma somewhere in another lifetime that paid in this lifetime. But the morphine, I'm just going to start there. The morphine, I remember, because it was so consistent that it unleashed the natural DMT in my brain. And Sam, if you could see how I see, since then, I have an active DMT that I can see jaguars without drinking nothing. I can see hummingbirds and all of that. But when you were sharing that, what your conversation brought awareness to myself is the feeling, first of all, that there was something in you deeply spiritually rooted where you chose to get better. Because I know so many people that have gone through worse things than you and I went through the fire, right? We went through like the car accidents, the limbs, the no movement. I cannot move this arm, right? And all of that. But there was something like an evolutionary impulse. And I want to explore that a little bit with you. That's the evolutionary impulse that had you choose and believe, I'm going to get out of here, even though if I cannot walk, even though if I cannot do that, that impulse, I believe, is such and I'm careful to say higher consciousness because the terms of spirituality are so biased now, right? But just pure consciousness, which brings me to, I couldn't grab with what you shared. I just want to sit with you and let's 3 nights, 3 days, just share this reconnection of soul that it feels very much like it right now. But this evolutionary impulse that brought you there, and then you had, I think this was more than just samadhi, that I think this is a moment of pure enlightenment, what you were experiencing, right? Like this body chitta moment, this just conscious awareness. And what you shared about you didn't become one with the breath, you were the breath. That's Sam, that's in my spiritual practice. That's my goal with the tea ceremony. I'm like, why do I still feel that I'm drinking tea? I look forward just to practice I'm the tea, the tea is me. And you experienced that. So what do you think? And this is a challenging question because for this type of questions, I don't know if there is an answer that we can translate into human words for this field or this realm, but what was that impulse? What was in your heart? What was in your soul that you said, I got to get on with the program. I got to practice my breath. Besides that voice that you heard, that I truly believe that we are so guided by invisible forces, all these different realms that represent who we are too. But what was this impulse? What was this? Is it love? Was it hope? Was it this mission that you had, that you have helped thousands of people? What do you think it was or is?
So that's a fantastic question. And I think that it has changed over time, where obviously the framework, the frame of reference that we adopt for certain periods of our lives based on the level of consciousness that we're at that time will naturally shape the narrative of the experiences that we're having. And during that time, my quest was to heal. I simply wanted to become able-bodied again. I didn't want to accept paralysis. I wanted to heal from paralysis. And I was going to do anything that it took to heal from paralysis. I wasn't in a space of accepting that this was just going to be my permanent condition. I had a strong love affair with recreational activities, with snowboarding and skiing and cycling and hiking and all of those things. And I wanted to get back to that place where I could be doing that. So at that time, my initial impulse around healing was, okay, I'm not going to take this present circumstance at face value. I know that I have something in me, and that I've got the energy in me to tap into something and move through this. So that was the frame of reference at the time. More and more and more, it became evident that my dreams and goals of recovering the function in my lower body was not going to happen in the way that I thought that it was, or with the timeline that I thought that it was. And as a result, there were periods, like I said, where I fell into depression. I fell into abusing alcohol and abusing marijuana, and just kind of zoning out, and kind of, not really either being here or there, but being sort of in a bit of a ongoing limbo state, because I could no longer really convince myself that I had the capacity to become able-bodied again, because I wasn't seeing the evidence in it after years and years and years of attempting to. And yet I still always connected to something deeper with respect to the spiritual potential, I suppose. And I also started to receive a lot of feedback from people that they admired the way that I was living, even though there were things about my own life that I wasn't really admiring. There were a lot of people who would look to me for mentorship. And then I started to see this as, oh, well, perhaps this is the universe's gift to me as a means by which I can serve as a mentor, and that there is something to be gained for myself and for the world through leaning into that mentorship and teaching about non-attachment and so forth, and how to adopt the principles of non-attachment, and whether one wants to call it Buddhist or Zen or whatever, just on a practical level, how to free oneself from circumstances and and outcomes so that they can live more freely in the moment. So that became kind of the frame of reference that I operated from at that time. And now at this stage, there's a wise sage friend of mine who is just a beautiful human being. Maybe you could have him on the podcast sometime, named Prince Stash Derola Klasowski. He's a fascinating.
Oh my God, Sam, I gotta practice his last name.
Yeah, I have to practice his last name.
Open invitation for him.
Prince Stash Derola Klasowski. He's a wonderful man in his 80s who has a phenomenal history of being friends with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and all of this stuff. And he is this sage with a bundle of one dreadlock of gray hair that hangs all the way to the ground, that he wears as a crown on his head, and spends half of his time in a castle in Italy and half of his time in Malibu. He's become one of my closest friends. and he's an absolute profound alchemist, and he speaks in this deep English accent, and he always uses the term the absolute elsewhereness of being. And when he talks about the absolute elsewhereness of being, that is something that deeply resonates, because what I have recognized in the profound nature of that statement, or that phrase, is that any attempts to apply a subjective story or narrative to personal experience fail, because there is only the illusion that the subjective mind is here in any kind of logical, understandable form. That there is anything, even the notion that there is something to be gained or learned from or anything, is all part of the more illusory state of consciousness. It's not to say that it's not relevant. There might be some relevance to it. And if it wouldn't exist, meaning the subjective mind and ego wouldn't exist if it didn't have some type of evolutionary context for, but it's not the actual game that we're playing. The absolute elsewhereness of being is that which is guiding the whole orchestration of life itself. And so what I'm really learning to do now is to let go of this notion of I, me, my story, my experience, my this, my that, and really try my best to surrender that whole need to know, and to recognize that life is orchestrating the way that it wishes to orchestrate, whether or not I prefer the way in which it is orchestrating itself. And so that's the perspective that I am doing my best to adopt on a regular basis. And it's challenging to adopt it, because the subjective mind is the so much the focus of every conversation and everything that we experience in this waking life.
Yeah, and even having this conversation, I require my I to communicate with you, another I in itself. But transcendentally, like if if we didn't have words, right? Like right now, if we could, and we can, because at the core essence of who we are, that's what we are, and we can consciously aware without even consciousness, without being awareness, because all of these are terms, right? We become the breath. Like you had the experience, you were home, that's home, right? The home, that oneness, that I'm the air, I'm the breath, without the I am thing. When that unfolds, and I think that folks that listen to the podcast, this is something that perhaps you can help me transfer into language of, like, why is it important in this path, this evolutionary path of consciousness, of self-awareness, of self-actualization, at the service of the whole, to drop the I, me, mine. I find it very challenging to even speak about me, right? I have seen how that I is like, oh, I went into another labyrinth. I'm not getting out because now it's I, now it's mine, now it's me. And that is very much the work of Zen, right? I don't know if you're aware of Rinzai Zen, right? Like the meditation, the chanting, the consistent repeating of the bodhisattva vows is not to have more stuff to add to the mind, but it's to kind of go into a trance, relinquish yourself, and just be there as one. I don't even have words, Sam. Help me put into words for the
Sure.
people here.
Sure.
Why I, me, mine, me, myself, is an illusion.
Sure. I think we're conditioned around, just culturally, we're conditioned around this notion of personal ambition, that there is an outcome to attain, and that there are preferences that we that govern our emotional states. The process of practicing Zen really is to work with those preferences, to work with becoming aware of those preferences and how they are so consistently contribute to our behaviors and keeping us ensnared in a certain type of reality which we simply cannot get out of and free ourselves from because we're bound by those preferences. This is happening all the time at the level of people listening to the latest stuff about politics. What did Trump say today, and what did Kamala say today, and who's ahead and who's behind, and who's saying this and who's saying that, and who's full of shit and who's not full of shit, and this and that, and letting those little things govern how they feel inside of themselves, govern their inner state. And then we can think the same thing about, oh, I'm hungry right now. I have a preference for a certain type of food, which I feel will satiate me. Well, is that satiety actually preventing a certain new awareness from coming in? Because that satiety is actually just on this side of an emotional context that we could be actually confronting and using as a means by which to deepen our awareness of ourselves or expand beyond. Is there something uncomfortable that is being satiated by the food? There's so many things that are governing our sense of behavior, ambition, etc., which keep us ensnared into a very limited sense of identity. And it's that limited sense of identity that Zen practices are really, as you well know. I know that I'm not telling you anything new, but it's really about deconditioning all of that, or at least becoming aware of those things and practicing gentle prohibition from going in the direction of continuing those behaviors, in order that one can actually go deeper inside of the inner experience and release the attachment. But attachments are left and right. We live in an identifying culture. We live in a culture that says not only is it totally normal that you identify with a certain tribe of people who think a certain way and eat a certain way and do certain things. Not only is that totally normal, not only is that totally acceptable, but we applaud how much you continue to do that, because it keeps helping the machine of culture to stay at its same status quo level. And we don't really need you to go into an inner experience of spirit, because that isn't necessarily going to help anything at a cultural level. It can only help free oneself at an individual level. It's not helping anyone else at a cultural level. So it has to be really a devotional practice that is between self and God.
Wow. Sam. Devotion, bhakti in Sanskrit. I love that word. Devotion between self and God. How does that look like for you? Not only individually, but because I believe that once there's this presence of devotion, advancement with God in a devotional manner, in a really reverent, in a really kind of that's the sacred, right? That even the word sacred is kind of mundane now because it's so misused. But how do you envision this activation, this remembrance of devotion for the individual and the collective? And what impact could this have in our both inner and outer world?
I suppose that it facilitates the dynamic expression of life. And what I mean by that is, we could look at this in terms of movement, not necessarily the phenomenon of physical movement. That's part of it, the phenomenon of physical movement. But the ability to be as dynamic as possible with perception. Throughout all of the mentorship and coaching that I've done over the years, the single thing, the single through line, the single principle that each and every person that I've worked with has had, despite all of the different circumstances of their lives, men, women, any different ages, etc., the single common principle is the perception that movement has been inhibited. That there's something that there's greater that could potentially be tapped into, but it's being inhibited by something. And it's an invisible something. It's not clear what it is. And it's especially not clear what it is when we are in a culture where almost everyone's movement is inhibited. But we've normalized the inhibition, we've normalized the inhibition of movement. We've normalized a static perception of self, which is where we identify. We start to label our experience based on our job status, the amount of money that we have in our bank accounts, our partner, our sexuality, our gender, our this or that. We put all of these labels on experience to create a static, illusory perception of self that then becomes its own prison. And so the practice is really to re-inhabit and embody dynamic movement, because nature is always an expression of dynamic movement, but human beings are the only thing that have separated ourselves from nature by creating a static perception of self.
This is so deep, Sam. This is so deep and yet so natural, and it's true. It's such an illusion, right? Such a delusive aspect. That's why I'm not sure if you are aware of the Heart Sutra. And the Heart Sutra, it's this conversation of Buddha with Shariputra, one of his disciples. They're talking about, as you speak, I'm like, he's sharing this sutra. I'm understanding the Heart Sutra in a more eloquent, in the flesh, kind of in the daily life level with you right now, because they are speaking about this, right? It's a conversation of the Buddha with Shariputra, like it's impermanence, everything, all of the I, me, whatever is is diluted, even that what you think it doesn't move is moving. Even that which is moving, it's not. It's so. It is. I truly believe that for an I, there's the I again, but for purposeful uses right now,
Sure.
we're going to use the
we have to adopt it for language, for the use of language.
But I love that. Let's adopt. I'm going to use my eye for language. I'm going to use my eye to pay my bills. I'm going to use my eye to.
Yeah, we can't make an enemy of the language. We can just be very clear about its use.
Exactly, and clarity is such a consistent pursuit of mine and all of our team. It's like, how can we be more clear than that which we are doing already? But in this land of impermanence, which seems to me that was the first, like you recognize impermanence, and it's very early in life, right? Very early in life, watching nature with the situation, that the incident that unfolded for you, the way that you took it, the way of movement, the way of noticing that. And you talk about Trump and Kamala and likes and dislikes, and you know how strong likes and dislikes is what keeps people out of clarity. It's the land of confusion, is the land of likes and dislikes. Right? I like this, but not that. You separate, you create this illusory duality. In the essence of life is non-dual, but we create this duality and now these polarities, which I understand for just the concept of understanding our life. But how in these times, Sam, because we have a lot of polarization going, we have a lot of likes and dislikes, and plus we have social media, right? That social media is like, I crave and I survive based on your attention, your dopamine hits, and your likes and dislikes. It's like the machine is getting more powerful. We're feeding her with our fear. We're feeding her with our identifications that you were talking about. Now I am a me. Now I am a lawyer. Now I'm married. Now I am old. Now I am dying. Now I am not young. All of that. So how can we, or how can you, let's talk about your coaching programs and your mentorship with people and how you help people. How can you help people, communities, governments to become aware or to wake up a little bit more deeper into that nature that will not only not save them, but serve them to go more in a harmonic rhythm with the evolutionary impulse of the universe, but also just create a better world, because it's such a madhouse, of all of our delusions projected in other delusions. It's just a never-ending story of suffering.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a big question without a clear and specific response, I suppose. But I'll explore this with you, like how to sort of generalize the response. So first of all, I don't want to suggest that I am so enlightened that I don't also participate with news cycles and with, this and that. I still pay attention. There's part of me that wants to know what's going on. What happened in the debate the other night? Who's saying what? I think it's natural that we want to have a read on what is occurring at a cultural level. We want to know. And there's part of us that's conditioned around knowing. Otherwise, it feels like it's too isolated and too separated. And that isolation and separation, I think evolutionarily, isolation and separation has never served us well. It's like we need to have some kind of context for what is occurring at the level of culture in order to create a sense of coherence at that level. To be able to function inside of culture, we at least need to be somewhat aware. Don't have to follow every little unfolding breaking news story every single day, but to at least have some kind of awareness of what's going on inside of the cultural zeitgeist, so that we can navigate and sort of map our way through the culture. And I'm certainly not independent of preferences too. I know that there are certain things that I choose to eat for certain reasons, and certain things that I choose to watch on the TV and that kind of thing. So I'm aware that I play inside of those domains, inside of entertainment, inside of music and culture, inside of the news cycles, etc. But if we get so ensnared that we find ourselves going into an emotional agitation, then it shows that we've then been trapped by a story, by the dualistic trap, and by people who are profiting off of our attention, who have recognized, oh, if we really share this biased information in such a way that is going to emotionally ensnare the audience, then we are going to get more likes and we are going to get more advertisers and so forth and that kind of thing. We have to see the game for how it's played and recognize that it's not necessarily a malignant thing. It's just an unconscious thing. It's just people are doing the thing that they know is going to bring more people who are in that particular mindset into that arena, and then there's money to be made from that. And so we live in this, and then the more extreme the volume gets turned up in terms of the rhetoric, then the more likely it will grab us by limbic hijack, meaning it will take our emotional capacity and it will rob us of our ability to actually think for ourselves, because we're now emotionally invested in such a way where we feel that the outcome of culture itself or the world itself may rest upon this particular person and the decisions or thoughts or things that they say or the people that get behind them or all those things. That's the world that we live in right now. So when I play in that world, I play in such a way where I simultaneously listen and pay attention in order to sort of recognize what's happening at that cultural level, and then simultaneously go, okay, now that's done. Now go back into eternal self that cannot be harmed, that is not, where there is no progress, there is no degress, there is just the now, the eternal moment of now, and turning off the noise to create to reestablish the relationship that is the relationship of the now, the eternal now, connecting inside of the body, inside of the energy, recognizing that no matter what happens in the outside world, on some level, it cannot harm the eternal self.
Sam, I think this is the perfect way to close. I mean, culture, consciousness, and the eternal self. I'm going to invite everyone listening to listen to this a couple of times. I myself, I have so many notes. If you're watching on YouTube, you will see me like a little squirrel, writing down and really paying attention to listen. But because this is really profound, and if we consider, I'm trying it on myself, right? I'm trying it on. The eye is trying it on in itself. But when I remember that, when I'm really attuned to consciousness, to a culture that transcends only the me, and that's where I can tap into the eternal self. And I think that's a little pathway towards ultimate liberation, to moksha, to freedom. So, wow, Sam, I think I need you back, in the podcast. You are such a source of source. Spirit, you're such a source of source and so calming. It's for some reason you have, and maybe in another occasion we'll talk about that. I don't know how you learn to manage your nervous system of all the training years, but I immediately can feel it in my own body. I'm like the rapport is easy. It's like matching is easy when there's calm and safety and groundedness. So thank you for that. So yeah. So, beloved Sam, so how can people reach out to you? I know you're a mentor, a coach. You are having. Do you want to share a little bit
Yeah,
with
and a
us?
newfound CEO. So my life is busier than
Yes, I
ever
want to
these
know. I want to
days.
know. So, because you said you have new things. So, what's going on in your life, and then how can people reach you? Tell us a little bit about it, because
Yeah,
I have
if anyone
curiosity.
wants to reach me, the best way to do so is by email. It's sam@zenwarriortraining.com is
Zen
my
Warrior Training. Zen
mentorship.
Warrior Training. We'll make sure to put it on the comments.
zenwarriortraining.com. Say
Perfect.
that again.
Sam at zenwarriortraining.com, correct?
That's right. zenwarriortraining.com. Yep.
And you're a CEO. Can you say a little bit or no? Is
Yeah,
that
I formed a new company not long ago. It's called USA Protective Care. It has nothing to do with anything. Well, I suppose everything has something to do with something spiritual, but it's not directly. It's a company providing authentication and anti-counterfeit technology to US-based health and wellness brands to protect their brands from being counterfeited. So that's what I'm doing in addition to my
that's
coaching.
amazing, Sam. We have so many listeners that work on that area. So I think this is not coincidental. This is like support to all my wellness to incredible friends that are dealing with all of these copycatting, stealing technologies, all of that. Reach out to my
Well,
friend.
in
That's
that case, if
incredible.
you want to reach me for that reason, use sam@usaprotectivecare.com.
Wow, that's it. But usaprotectivecare.com and Zen Warrior Training, I think they match. It's the same type of energy, just located in a different position of the
That's right.
chess
Just different
game.
different angles. That's
The
right.
different angles, the chess game. This Lila, this play of consciousness. Oh, well, congratulations, Sam. So I think a lot of the people that listen to the podcast are going to be like, what? you know, they're going to be all expanding, entering into states of deep samadhi, and suddenly like, I need to call him for these services. That's awesome, Sam.
I would love to talk to anyone who is in the audience listening today.
Congratulations. Anyways, I like to congratulate you for that. Is there
Well,
any
thank you.
last message of like, or any practice that you would like to leave our listeners with so they can be more clear,
Well,
attuned
first
to
of all,
that?
I think you started it off just right. Just take life. Don't take life seriously. It's too seriously. Take it seriously where you need to, but don't take it seriously where you don't need to. I think that I think there is a lot of wisdom in those words because it is that which creates the sort of lubrication of consciousness, right? When we're taking life too seriously, it means that we're emotionally hijacked by circumstance. And so that literally neurologically, I'm not just talking on some sort of spiritual level, literally neurologically, we cannot apply our attention to things that are of a higher order of consciousness as long as we think that we are being protected emotionally by our state. So that seriousness, while I would say replace seriousness with sincerity. If you can be sincere, but not overly serious, then it means that you can apply your attention in a sincere, devoted way without getting trapped by the emotional context which prevent you from those higher orders of thinking.
Sam, I gotta remember that I'm the interviewer here. That was like mic drop. Wow. Wow, I'm left with a lot of food for spirit, soul, heart, and thought. Sam, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you
hope
so
you
much,
come
Ivonne.
back, And do you have any books? By the way, you're an incredible writer. I've
Thank
seen
you.
the
I'm actually working on a novel at the moment, but nothing quite yet. But yeah, we'll see. That could change. There could be
Well,
something
you
coming
let
up.
us know. Come back to the podcast. This is your podcast home whenever you want to share anything. Protected services, sandwater training, your new novel, whatever it is, and maybe one day guiding us to the bread, because that's
I would love
I don't
to.
know, just very quickly before, have you heard of this exercise in Zen called Susosukan? Susosukan that
No, I don't know of it.
it's from Rinzai Zen that you breathe one, but the exhale and the inhale are just one. There's not one and two, it's just one. And it's not you are counting the breath is counting you. It's such an incredible practice. I'm just learning about all Rinzai Zen, so I'm just a baby Zenner.
I love that. Wonderful.
But anyways, so Sam, it was such a pleasure to have your wisdom and both compassion together. And
It's a deep
friends,
honor.
yes, we're gonna put all the information of Mr. Sam Morris for you, his 2 emails for you to reach out to him, his social media, and we hope you take something from this that helps your life be more joyful, deeper, empowered, and live with more abundance, spiritual internally, and with more joy. That's my wish for you today. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone. Les mandamos un beso. Adios.
Thank you, Ivonne.
Thank you for tuning into the Spirituality Now podcast. We hope today's episode has inspired and empowered you on your spiritual journey. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who may benefit from it. Remember, spirituality is not just something we practice. It is how we live, how we serve, and how we connect. Stay grounded, stay inspired, and keep evolving. Please join us next time for more enlightening discussions. And until then, take care and be well.